Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Muslim Network TV is 24/7. We air on satellite Galaxy 19, which covers whole United States, north to south, east to west, and Canada, as well as Mexico. We also stream on OTT platforms like Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and of course, you're on iPhone and Android if you download our app, Muslim Network TV. And we are, of course, our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. The conversation is substantial in the Muslim community because of the Associated Press reported that 35% of all Muslims voted for President Trump. And that conversation is going around. What many Muslims may or may not remember, or America even may not know, is that in 2000, Muslim organizations developed a sort of a coalition, and they endorsed Governor Bush. And in Florida, where there are about 100 mosques and 60,000 Muslim voters, probably they contributed to the 500 votes which made Governor Bush President Bush. Well, after that, the pendulum swung on the other direction. Muslims started voting in huge numbers for Democratic Party, but seems to be swinging somewhere towards the middle with the news that 35% of Muslims in America voted for Trump. But who are these Muslims who are voting this way or that way? What is their profile? Well, what profile is not something which we like. Actually, Muslim voted for President Trump because he promised and delivered that in the presidential debate, he will mention profiling of Muslim and singling them out is wrong, and the secret evidence is wrong and non-American, while Vice President Al Gore simply refused to meet Muslim delegation. So that was a sort of a tilt, but it was historically Muslims, immigrant especially, had been voting Republicans. And African American Muslim, that was the only time a larger number voted for Republicans. Otherwise, they traditionally continue to vote Democrats. So we will have interesting conversation, but to participate in this conversation are leaders of two major institutions. One is CAIR, Council of American Islamic Relations. They do surveys. And ISPU. ISPU stands for Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. It's a sort of a think tank led by Muslims, and their leaders, both of them have surveys before an exit poll, and I look forward to having this interesting conversation. So we have with us Erum Ikramullah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for sparing your time. Erum is the Manager of Research at ISPU, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, and Robert McCaw. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome salam. Robert McCaw is Director of Government Affairs at the Council of American Islamic Relations, CAIR. Well, thank you so much. First, for sparing your time. Second, for doing this survey, which provides some insight to what Muslims are up to now. So tell us, Erum, how many Muslims were registered to vote? You had some prior surveys about that, right?
Yeah, that's a great question and great place to start at. So just to keep in mind, the survey that ISPU fielded, called the American Muslim Poll, we fielded that survey in March of 2020. So it's not directly before the election or directly after. So it's important to keep that timing in mind as we compare the different data from all the different surveys that are out there. But what we found is that as of from mid-March to mid-April is when we fielded our survey. So from that point, we found that 78% of eligible to vote American Muslims were registered to vote. And we find that that does lag behind other faith communities in the US. However, the positive news is that 78% is just an increase from 60% in 2016. So what we have found is that since 2016, when we first fielded our poll, so we have 5 years of data, we have found a steady increase in American Muslim voter registration. So that's wonderful news for the community.
So is it a substantial increase this time, or it is increasing with the same margin as in the past?
I think it's more important to look at that just that steady increase from 2016, you know, that it is still going up. It hasn't leveled off. So that's really the important thing to look at, that it has steadily increased since 2016. And what's also notable about that increase is actually what we have found is that there's this more of people's intentions to vote are in line with their behavior being registered to vote. So in 2016, we coined a term called the Inshallah voter, in quotes. It's something that we coined to represent those who say that they intend to vote, but they're not actually registered to do so. So in 2016, 81% of American Muslims said that they intend to vote, but only 60% were registered. So that there's a 21% gap between their intentions and their actual behavior. By 2020, that gap has narrowed to just 3%. So you had 81% who planned to vote and 78% who are registered.
Robert, CAIR exit survey, which came out late in the evening of November 3rd, it mentions that how Muslim voted and all that. But in terms of methodology, it mentions that you match the standard Muslim names with the database of all voters in America. So you probably have the actual total number of Muslim who are registered to vote. How many are those?
I would also just add one caveat, because this is just a list of Muslim names being thrown against our National Registry of Voters. Muslims like myself, Robert McCaw, a number of African-American converts who have not formally changed their name, but may have even informally done so. We don't pick up those numbers. But what we did see when we matched a common list of over 40,000 Muslim names to the American Voter Registry database, there was over 1 million registered voters who we estimate could be Muslim.
Okay, so that's a pretty large number, and so they are registered to vote, but you have no way of knowing how many Muslims are there who have not registered. I'm trying to see if there is a match between what ISPU found and what you found.
I think that CAIR believes that there are over 6 million Muslims in the United States. I don't know the number that ISPU estimates for the number of Muslims in the US. Pew has a totally different way they calculate it, and it's much lower, a number CAIR doesn't accept. But really, the numbers can range greatly between how many Muslims are registered to vote and how many should be registered to vote, based on what is the total number of Muslims in the United States. CAIR bases its numbers off the 2011 National Mosque Survey, where they did a calculation. That estimate was at that time over 6 million.
Okay, so let's move on that conversation, because I don't think ISPU has a number of how many Muslims are there. If you do, please go ahead.
No, we don't.
Okay, so this is my challenge to CAIR. You have an old number. When that mass survey was done, there are 6 million Muslims. I know a little bit about the survey methodology. NORC president actually gave a very critical feedback to an article which I wrote about the population of Muslims here. But why CAIR or ISPU does not conduct a very large sample survey of the whole country. A methodology which was used by American Jewish community in 3 of their survey to determine how many Muslims are there in America. They're the one who started challenging the total, what is the total population of Muslims? Because Muslim used to say 5-6 million, and when they have little bit more sweets to eat, they will say 10 million Muslims there. They were the one who started challenging. There are 3 surveys sponsored, conducted by American Jewish community of the Muslim community. Based on that, NORC conducted the 4th. That was a survey of all data available, all studies available about the number of Muslims. That was before Pew came up. So in that way, don't you think a national organization of Muslim or a think tank like yours ought to embark upon a study of this nature?
I think we should always be trying to figure out how we estimate the number of Muslims in the United States. ISPU is, far greater in its research ability to probably get that right number. I would say that Muslims are a little like Trump voters, which when you try to survey them, they don't always show up. And so I think, we really do have to figure out how can you weight the Muslim community to be well representative. But a lot of Muslims come from either families that just aren't oriented to answering the phone and divulging their information, or have come from countries where they wouldn't trust that methodology either. So I don't know if it's as easy said and done to get that one great estimation. I'll leave it to Erum.
Okay. Erum, is a part of the ISPU plan to have a study of that nature?
No, actually, it's not. When we do our poll, we partner with a firm called SSRS to do all our fielding of our questionnaire, and they have expertise in fielding to these minority populations. Actually, specifically, that's why we sought them out to partner with us on this
Is
survey.
it the same organization which does social science research survey throughout I think for 50 years or so?
Yeah, and so they have expertise, for example, with fielding the Jewish population, which is a small religious minority. So that's why we sought them out to work with us on this study as well. But it's not really one of our goals to get an actual estimate of the number of Muslims, rather to study the issues that impact upon Muslims and to share that research.
Okay, so let's talk about based on the registered voter, the percentage of Muslim who voted. Is it higher, lower, or the same as general population?
So from our findings, it's lower. So American Muslims are at 78% in terms of the percent who are registered to vote, which is lower than all other groups we surveyed.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about a little bit about the Muslim vote. Whom did the Muslim vote? What is Robert CAIR survey says about it?
Yeah, so we conducted our survey the night of the November 3rd election. We asked people if they voted because they might not have voted that day, but they might have voted early, like myself or other people, or mailed in. We surveyed 844 registered Muslim voters across the country, all 4 major time zones, over 35 states, and 69% reported that they voted for Joe Biden, 17% reported that they voted for Trump, and 11% refused to answer. And internally, when CAIR looks at that 11%, we hazard to guess that a good portion of them could be shy Trump voters, Muslims that did not necessarily want to say they voted for Trump. And so the actual number of Muslims that voted for Trump that CAIR estimates could easily be in the mid-20s, up to 25%.
So the survey question was asked by ISPU who you intend to vote for. You would like to share that?
Sure. And just a reminder that this was at the time that the primaries were still going on. It was winding down, but for example, Bernie Sanders he dropped out midway of our fielding. But what we found was that at that time, 14% of American Muslims expressed preference for Donald Trump as their candidate of preference, and 29% selected Bernie Sanders, and 22% selected Joe Biden.
And the Associated Press says that 35% Muslims voted for Trump. That is, even if we combined 17% of what CAIR says voted for Trump in the exit poll, plus all the people who refused to answer, it is still seems to be pretty higher. And their survey, has a margin of error of 0.4%, which was substantially higher in that way. But that correlates, don't you think, Erum, with your question that when you ask, do you approve of the President Trump performance, 30% people says yes, they do, 30% Muslims, right?
Yes, that's correct. We found that 30% of Muslims say they approve of President Trump's performance, his job performance. So that definitely could be related.
Let me ask both of you, do people who do your survey or people who are calling on your behalf, do they start saying salam in the beginning or not?
So my survey is actually pre-recorded and it actually had my voice. So it always starts with Assalamu alaikum. This is Robert with CAIR. We're conducting another survey. And we find that usually we get a really good response when we do salam. We interchange between male and female addressees with each survey. So this time it was male and I got to do it. Last time our communications coordinator, Ayan, did our Super Tuesday poll. So yes, always trying to ask people if they're Muslim, identify as Muslim, give an Islamic greeting, kind of to weed out any people from our survey that, we could have got the numbers, but they might not be Muslim. And I just want to add one point for the AP poll. I don't know what their preliminary qualifiers were for that Muslim population, that big N, population. But even if they have a small margin of error, it really begs to whether they correctly surveyed African American voters as much as they did Arab or South Asian in the right ratio that makes up our community. And whenever that ratio gets wrong, the results start to skew.
Is the ISPU survey start by saying salam and greeting to people?
No, our survey does not. So our survey is not limited to Muslims. So we survey the general public, including, and then we pull out specific religious groups to compare Muslims to. So white evangelicals, Catholics, Protestants, Jewish Americans, and non-affiliated Americans are all surveyed. So what happens is the person who's reading the questionnaire will call somebody, and first they have to find out and ask what religious group they identify with before they even determine whether or not the person they're speaking to is Muslim. So we don't start the survey with them.
Okay, so the CAIR survey, exit survey had about 700-800 people. How many people your survey had at the total population wise?
The ISPU, we surveyed over 2,000 people for our full sample, including 800 Muslims.
Okay. You're watching Muslim Network TV, and we have with us Erum Ikramullah, who is with ISPU, and Robert McCaw, who is with CAIR. We'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam. You remember me? I appeared in so many episodes that Sound Vision has put on the market. No matter what. Hey, what's happening? Hey, oh, sorry. Lockdown is what it is. Well, continuing here. In this lockdown, Sound Vision never stops thinking about you, the viewer. We'll have to get back into production again, online and inline. Everybody in their own space, even me. Although I'm stuck with Lanisa.
Salam! Salam! Salam!
I know, you were shocked too. Well, let me continue. This is what I was going to say. Salam! 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 Cut! Finally, I get my own screen time again. Thank God. And so we invested in new equipment to bring you even better production with new songs and new singers and animations. Well, here are a few clips. And Sound Vision has brought all this into your home, making Islamic values and teachings easy. And if you know me, Adam, a multi-talented actor, well, sometimes I'm an actor and the reporter and the... Oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next section. Well, you can watch these new episodes on our new app at www.adamsworldapp.com. We have previews happening every day on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision has been serving generations, moving and changing with the times. We are all faithfully connected. That is a huge blessing. Your donation helps keep these programs available now and into the future. We take this job of helping tomorrow's Muslims today seriously, and you should too. Today, we need your help. Children absorb and learn from everything they encounter. Make that wholesome, positive, grounded in our faith. Together, we can accomplish our goal of raising better Muslims, better neighbors, and better citizens. Please donate generously. It's an investment in our future. But to finish, let me tell you, there are new scripts of my new mission. And it is something that I enjoy talking about. My new mission is space. Houston, we do not have a problem. Salam, see you soon. Me too.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and with me is Robert McCaw as well as Erum. And we are talking about Erum Ikramullah from ISPU. And we are talking about Muslim votes. How did they vote? And what is the profile of the people who are voting in that particular way? And so Erum, one of the question I have with you, and at this moment, none of you are on my screen. I hope you're still there. Muslim Trump supporters are like general Trump supporter. That is the conclusion of ISPU survey. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really, really important finding from our poll this year. As you mentioned, we found that Trump supporters in the Muslim community are similar to Trump supporters in the general public. So we ran a regression model to see what factors, predict support for President Trump in terms of selecting him as the preferred candidate. And we found that those who select Trump, whether Muslim or from the general public, are more likely to be white, to be a Republican, to hold the economy as their most important policy priority. Additionally, they're more likely to be opposed to building coalitions with Black Lives Matter, and more likely to favor coalition building with political conservatives on religious liberty issues. And finally, both, including Muslims, are more likely to endorse anti-Muslim tropes. So to score higher on Islamophobia.
Okay, we'll talk about anti-Muslim trope a little later.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your observation there, Robert?
Sorry, taking my mute off. Our numbers actually match pretty similar to ISPU's. So we found that on average, any election year, 15 to 25% of Muslims in our survey identify as Republican. When we do break down the survey responses of Republican Muslim voters, we find in general, it's not issues of social justice or education that are priorities for them, but more issues related to the economy, healthcare, which of course back in 2016 was especially related to the election and how that might be taxed or reformed. But we find it's more financial issues that are motivating Trump voters. And when you look at the issues of social justice or Islamophobia or civil rights, they rank much further down, like 5th or 6th or 7th. In comparison, when you look at Muslim voters, generally the 60 to 80% in our surveys, you'll see that vote Democrat. You'll see that issues of social justice, Islamophobia, civil rights, they always rank near the top, along with very domestic issues like education, healthcare, economy. But issues of social justice, healthcare, education usually rank higher amongst Democratic voting Muslims. And so I think that actually parallels American society very much. When you look at, the average Democratic voter or Republican voter, they skew these ways too. A recent breakout survey we did right after the first debate, we just asked Muslims, do you consider yourself fiscally liberal or fiscally conservative? And 46% of the Muslim community said they were fiscally conservative. And we asked a similar question, are you socially liberal or are you socially conservative? And the same number of 46% said they were socially liberal on policy issues. So Muslims, by survey, are equally socially liberal as they are fiscally conservative. And I think there's kind of this split in the Muslim community where there is a vein of conservative voting, fiscally conservative Muslims out there, and they might actually be socially progressive on some issues. But a large percentage of our community is fiscally conservative.
Do you agree, Erum, that a large percentage of Muslim community is actually conservative?
We don't ask that specific question, so I can't, back anything up with our data. But we do find that, the Muslims who vote for Trump tend to hold the economy as their most important policy priority. So that definitely would suggest so.
But don't you think that when you ask those people who are voting for Democratic Party, they may also consider economy as a major issue, but they may term it in the words of equity, poverty, so economy, but the vocabulary to address that might be different.
Yeah, it definitely could be. We have, when we ask about policy priority, you know, there are categories of the social justice categories, but we kind of categorize what the respondent tells us. So whether it's jobs or the economy, that will get coded as economy or jobs, or if it's issues of equity, that would probably get coded, you know, under equality and those more social justice issues. So it just depends on how they word it, like you're saying.
So those Muslims who are voting for a Democratic Party, what is their profile like? What are the things which they consider to be a top priority? You know, what I'm trying to see is if the civil rights issues, which essentially turned Muslim community away from the Republican Party of 2000 towards the Democratic Party, how much civil rights issues still play a role you know, so they may be socially conservative, but when it comes to civil rights, they consider Democratic Party to be better for them. Anyone, if you have any thoughts on it?
We did a survey again back after the first presidential debate, late October. Early October, and we found that Muslims viewed the Democratic Party, about 60-70%, as being more friendly towards them. Only 15% or so found the Republican Party being more friendly towards the Muslim community. And when you ask Muslim respondents on issues of is the Democratic Party, you know, friendly towards the Muslim community when it comes to issues of like upholding civil rights, upholding immigrant rights issues, you know, reforming law enforcement. Again, you'd see this 60% or so continuing to, you know, voice that they thought the Democratic Party was doing a better job at upholding these issues than that 15 or 20% that thought the Republican Party was equally doing as good as his job.
Erum?
So we don't specifically look at that in our survey. You know, we looked at factors associated with being a Trump supporter, but we didn't look at it the other way around with what factors predict being a supporter of Biden or Sanders at that time. We did find that 67% of Muslims chose a Democrat as their candidate of choice.
How do anyone of you, based on your current or the past surveys, have any idea how strong is the support of the Democratic Party or Republican Party? Meaning, are these party divisions fluid as compared to the mainstream or the general population, or they are more solid?
I can say that, you know, we tend to find that there are more Muslims who are undecided. So I think that might reflect, you know, an intention not to wholly identify with one political party among American Muslims.
Good. So do we go ahead?
I was going to say, I think that there was a transition from 2000 to maybe 2012 where some Muslims fled the Republican Party and either became independent voters or started caucusing or, you know, voting with the Democratic Party. But I think that really has leveled out to a certain degree where, you know, some 60% consider themselves Democratic, some 15 to 20, 25 even percent consider themselves Republican. And, you know, it's very fluid, but there's always about 20% that are, you know, undecided, independent-minded voters. And I think, you know, I don't see a lot of fluid change in that right now. I think those independent voters really could go either way, especially if the Republican Party started being less hostile towards Muslims and the community and our issues. But we also saw in 2018, you know, 80% of Muslims, even if they didn't vote for the Democratic Party, they were seeing it as at least being friendly towards Muslims. And that came with the election of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. to Congress, and Khizr Khan being given attention at the DNC in 2016, and then flash forward 2 years later with some of the harsh treatment that Muslims have had in the Democratic Party, with how Congress pushed back against the agendas of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. We saw an 18% drop in perception of friendliness within the Democratic Party. So I do think, how parties behave and treat Muslims and their representatives can greatly impact how they vote.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Erum, Ikramullah, and Robert McCaw, and we'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it and spread the word, because the wisdom is there. So I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Assalamu alaikum!
Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking with Erum Ikramullah and Robert McCaw. The ISPU survey says that half of the white Muslims, 50%, approve of President Trump, compared with 1/5 of 1/4 of non-white Muslims. Robert, I'm assuming you're a Muslim. Does it surprise you, or you seeing the same thing among other white Muslims?
I actually have to go back and say, how are we defining white Muslims? Because there are a number of Arab American Muslims that by some would be counted as Arab, but they might self-identify as white. Same with Persian Arabs or even North African. And so I don't think we have a very hefty Balkans population in the U.S. and a high convert ratio from the white community, but that it's just how some Arab or other Muslims identify as being white. That said, I think I've heard Erum on other programs kind of talk about, what that means in identifying as white Muslims. So I would love to hand it over to her.
All right, Erum, you have all the burden of talking on this now. But what I would say is that no matter how a person is identifying themselves, whoever considered themselves white is giving similar opinion as the other white people who identify as white in terms of President Trump, because there is some overlap over there also. Some Latino identify as white.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So again, our question is one where we ask respondents to identify their race. So we don't identify anyone or put them in their category based on their country of origin. So this is definitely an issue of where people are self-identifying into their racial category. So as you mentioned, these are people who call themselves white, whether they're white American, whether they're Persian, of European background. It could be, as Robert mentioned, it could be all those things that he had mentioned. So it's just people who have identified themselves as white. So we found that 50% of them approve of the way Donald Trump is handling his job as president. And that's really on par with 48% of white Americans in the general public. So, we know that, this is an issue that we're looking further into, because it was a really interesting finding that just kept coming out in our study. But again, it is based on a self-report.
One of the things which is very interesting, which I see in ISPU survey, I had some feeling for it. Reading papers and talking to some Muslims and all that, was that Trump supporters among Muslims are as likely or more likely to endorse anti-Muslim tropes. That was extraordinary, because we know of the phenomena thanks to Jewish writer about anti-Semitic Jew. Do we have Islamophobe Muslims among us now?
We do. So it's something we have explored in our previous American Muslim polls. So let me back up and kind of talk about how we are measuring Islamophobia and what these tropes are. So we have something we call the Islamophobia Index, which is based on 5 questions that we ask. There are 5 anti-Muslim tropes, and we ask respondents to rate their level of agreement with those tropes. And we didn't just pick these tropes, out of thin air. These 5 specific tropes that we ask about are ones that that previous research has shown to be associated with support for anti-Muslim policies. So that's why we specifically identified these 5 tropes. So we formed an index out of these 5 questions, and then we standardized the score on a scale of 0 to 100. So what we have found and we started this in 2018, is that Muslims don't score 0, right? There is a phenomenon that we have discussed called internalized Islamophobia. So what it really gets at is that Muslims are exposed to the same rhetoric, the same media that everybody else is exposed to, right? So just because you're a Muslim doesn't mean you're immune from internalizing those negative messages that you're hearing about your community.
So what's your experience, Robert, in this area? I mean, considering that your Council of American Islamic Relations, you hear about the discrimination reports and, on all of that. So what is those type of findings? Do you find from Muslims with these type of opinions?
When we look at our civil rights reports, as in, anti-Muslim bias complaints to CAIR, it's rare, but we have on times received complaints from Muslims about other Muslims discriminating against them or asking them not to wear, religious attire or do certain things which they viewed outside, standard American norms. There is no such thing as a standard American norm, but it's what they've perceived as, being. So it's rare, but it does happen. I do believe that people do internalize Islamophobia, and it wouldn't surprise me that some people can overlook anti-Muslim policies or rhetoric if they've internalized that, and that could even explain in part why some people even vote for Trump, because it's easier to overlook. I know I watched a video recording of a Muslims for Trump gathering that got Zoom bombed, but they were very adamant that they thought the president was doing a good job on issues of the economy. And when people were trying to bring up issues of Islamophobia, they would just more say it was an unfortunate. So not to deny it, but just to kind of overlook it. I think ISPU's survey is really telling, and that we learn a lot from these issues of internalized Islamophobia.
Well, I came to know first with in New York, there was a report of a girl being beaten in elementary school by a younger boy, and he was using the words calling her she observed hijab, scarf, calling her terrorist, calling her the B word, and beating her up physically. When father arrived in the school, he said, "Oh, my son himself is a Muslim." So that's the first time I say, "Oh my goodness, what is going on here?" Internalization of whatever people are saying. And I have seen some Muslims saying, I remember in downtown Chicago, we had a rally, and one imam and a Muslim community leader stood up declaring, "I am a fundamentalist Muslim." I say, what did he say, and what does he mean by that? So it seems like people are adopting vocabulary which is outside, but how far does it go? Are there Muslims who are, say, in support of war in Iraq and Afghanistan also? Anybody has any idea of those older thought processes? Were Muslim in support of wars and drones and bombings?
Well, I mean, you have to just look at the American Syrian community. It's very divided about, the conflict in Syria and Iraq. It's divided into, three big ethnic lines. And, there is differing opinions in each community about, whether we should have gone to war, we should pull out. And I think, Muslims are not a monolith. And within Muslim countries, there are not monoliths. And there are always factions of people that support the government and do not. And you see those same factions within the American Muslim community. So at any given time, there will always be some corner of the community that would support intervention because it aligns with either an ethnic viewpoint or a political viewpoint. And I think that would be very common.
I mean, I saw some people commenting on my personal Facebook conversation. Some were comparing how many drone attacks Obama has as compared to Trump, and they were favoring Trump because he has less drone attacks according to their survey, which may or may not be correct. The same thing, Uyghur Muslim, very vehemently supporting Trump, because considering that he is taking a stronger position on that. So that's very small level of conversation. Now, another thing which survey is saying of ISPU is that Muslim and Jews both are highly likely to volunteer for political campaigns, both at 16%. I mean, that seems to be a little difficult to believe, seeing the community which I know of. So, but survey is a survey because my observation is limited to my observation.
Mhm.
How confident you are? Because I mean, Jewish community. I mean, when I was in school, even well, that was a while ago, so it doesn't. I don't think it will apply. Jewish university students will take a quarter or so off in large number to go and work on campaign, and hardly any Muslim will do that. I mean, is it changing behavior, or is it you have higher level of confidence that Muslims are as politically active as the Jewish community?
Yeah, so this was a really interesting finding for us this year. This was the first year that we asked these questions, and we really wanted to get at civic engagement beyond voter registration and voting behavior. So we asked these questions about whether or not somebody has volunteered for a political campaign, made a campaign contribution, or attended a town hall. And we were really it was interesting to find that, as you mentioned, American Muslims were on par with other groups in terms of their political activity. So I think we definitely are confident of our findings. Our poll, our methodology is very strong. So I think really what it shows is that maybe there are aspects of the community anecdotally that we don't see, but this actually, is happening. And we don't have trend data we don't have anything to compare it to in terms of, prior data, but, based on the observation you mentioned, perhaps this does reflect a shift, in time of more acceptance of political engagement among the American Muslim community, especially maybe for youth, to seek out, careers or jobs or volunteerism on the political front, rather than sort of the typically accepted career paths.
Well, that will be a very good thing to further see the trend and compare with other surveys, because the survey which your director research, Imam Mujahid, working at Gallup, compiled, had the least registered to vote were Muslims from 18 to 28-year-old. So if that has changed, that's a substantial finding. What is your observation, Robert, on this particular issue? Are you seeing, or have you done any surveys which point to the higher level of political activism now as compared to, say, 10 years ago?
So we haven't done a recent survey that specifically asked a question on political activism. I know we did one in 2016, but I want to compare those numbers. What I can say is last week, CAIR, working with Empower Chains and Jetpack, we released a preliminary number of Muslim candidates that we gathered running for office. And last week, we found 110 Muslims in 24 states ran for office. And we're still calculating the exact number that won. We have a bigger number coming out actually in 2 days with the new report. But what we can see is there is an increase in the number of Muslims running for office from 2018 and 16. And when you have more Muslims running for office, you definitely have more Muslims volunteering in campaigns, for sure. And that inspires more in the community to get active and involved. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see more Muslims are volunteering for campaigns. When you see more Muslims overall are just running for office, and a good number, 40 or so, even one office across the nation.
So the other thing, one is voting, running for office, and another significant variable in terms of civic engagement is coalition building. And there's a whole lot of conversation about that. ISPU survey says that Muslim is split on coalition building with LGBTQ groups as compared to, and it is similar as Catholics. How do you see? I mean, what are the detail of this particular finding, Erum?
Yeah, so we found that the majority of Muslims, so 55%, were not in favor of, building political coalitions with LGBTQ activists, and that lack of support is, on par with Catholics and lower than the general public and Protestants as a whole, and also white evangelicals. And we found that Jewish Americans were the most likely group to favor building alliances with LGBTQ groups, and are the they were the only faith community we surveyed that had a majority to hold that view, to be in favor. So again, I think it's reflective of the nation that we're divided on these issues, right? Muslims, as Robert mentioned, are not a monolith. They're not all going to agree on issues of political coalition building. So there are differences. So looking at that a little bit further, we found that younger Muslims do tend to be more supportive of such alliances. So nearly half of Muslims aged 18 to 29, 48% support such coalition building, compared with about a quarter of Muslims aged 50 and older, and 38% of Muslims aged 30 to 49. And that pattern also holds true for the general public, where younger Americans are more supportive of aligning with LGBTQ groups.
Robert, what are the findings of CAIR on this topic?
CAIR hasn't done a lot of surveying on the issues related to LGBTQ. We did do a larger Muslim coalition survey out in, I think it was August, and we saw that the issue of that being a priority or concern for the Muslim community was one of the more lower tier issues. The Muslim community really is a monolith. I don't even know where I would begin on the issue of organizing with the LGBTQ community, but I would say that there are a lot of national issues that impact both Muslims and people from that community, whether it's related to workplace discrimination or school bullying. And CAIR finds itself every now and then on large national letters with hundreds of other nonprofit organizations in support. So I think there are some issues of common cause that both communities are striving for, but I haven't seen a lot of direct partnership between the two.
So is CAIR a member of some broader coalition in which LGBTQ community is also a member of the coalition?
I'm sure there are coalitions on the issues related to civil rights or workplace or school discrimination where, CAIR being one of many organizations could find itself in partnership with another group like that. Okay,
so let's go to the surveys. So ISPU does one survey a year, right? Okay, and how much surveys CAIR does?
Our surveys are more geared towards the election policy. A non-election year, we might do one general policy survey. This year during the election, we did 3 major surveys.
Okay, all right. The survey about the elections was, you had just 2 questions in the exit poll, it seems. But are other surveys have more questions? Are those results are published?
We had a post-presidential debate survey that had 20 questions. It went in depth on Muslim views on the candidates, the political parties, how well they thought the parties were working for the Muslim community. It's just called the CAIR 2020 pre-election survey. You can find it on our website, muslims.vote. And the exit poll survey was short by design because we wanted to get the information out immediately that evening, and I was the one crunching the numbers. So, and writing.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Robert McCaw, who is Director of Government Relations for the Council of American Islamic Relations, and Erum Ikramullah. Thank you so much for ISPU working as a manager surveys or manager research.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the project manager for our research department. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, and thank you so much for watching today's show. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid for producing today's show. You're watching Muslim Network TV. We are 24/7. We air on Galaxy 19 satellite covering whole North America and also on OTT devices like Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Roku, and of course, if you download our app on your own phone. Peace. Salam.